Good evening. Tonight, it's Tuesday, September 23rd, 2014. Welcome to the Southbridge School Committee meeting. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Now is the time for public input. Is there anybody from the public who would like to address the school committee this evening? Good evening. Would you please state your name and address for the record?
Yes, good evening. I just got nervous. I'm sorry. My name is Wally McKenzie, and I live at 45 South Street in Southbridge. And I come before you, the members of the Southbridge School Committee, to respectfully ask you to consider granting a lease to the Bridge of Faith group for their purpose of operating a youth center in the old high school for our youth and for the community. I know that a few of you may be somewhat apprehensive to grant this lease because a group from a church are operating this center. But I can assure you that there is no proselytizing or religious teaching of any kind. It has not been, is not now, and will not be taking place in the future. To ease your minds even further, please know that each staff member and volunteer has been properly and thoroughly query-checked. Also, the leaders of this center have complied with and instituted every mandate that the school committee has put forth as terms for allowing this center to be held in the old Southbridge High School building. As a side note, my 16-year-old son Jimmy is a member of this center, and he has nothing but high praise for the after-school tutoring and homework assistance that he has received while at the center. It is a great comfort to me to know that he is in safe hands while he's there, and that I am pleased to know that he is exposed to a staff who promote good moral values as opposed to what he could be exposed to if he was hanging out on the street corners with people that I don't know. I strongly and without hesitation urge the Southbridge School Committee to grant this lease for this wonderful group of town servants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie. Thank you.
No questions, right?
No, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the school committee this evening? Good evening, ma'am. If you would just state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Denise Gomez. I live at 36 Benefit Street, Southbridge, Mass. I come here in means to gain you guys' support for our beautiful youth service, our youth program for our children. I have triplets in the program, and I know a lot of the families members, and I work there as a volunteer myself. We have great career goals for our children. And I'm sure all of your parents as well would understand. You'd prefer to see your children in a safe environment where there's people that are curry check, like James's dad said. We go through a lot of programs with the children. We give them tutoring. We help them with their homework projects. We have computer access for the children. And we would just like a chance to prove ourselves to the community that we're here for the best interests of our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello. If you would just state your name and the school you attend or program you attend.
My name is James Wallace McKenzie. I attend Bay Path Vocational Regional Technical High School. I've been going to the Bridge of Faith for as long as it's been open, and my biggest struggle in classes is math, and during my time in the tutoring when I would go there, I excelled in my algebraic equations and in history. While I'm going there, I notice that there's more and more people there that are my age and younger, and during my time there, the staff there are always looking to work with the kids, and there it's always homework first, and then you get to do what you need. So education is the main priority. I think that the Bridge of Faith is good because you get your kids to go to a place where they're taught positive morals and they have a positive atmosphere than if they were in the streets of Southbridge. Not saying that the streets of Southbridge are bad, but there are more positive things in that place because they're grown-ups. They've been through it all. They know what's going on. And I would really like to see the Bridge of Faith still open. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Good evening. If you would just state your name and the school you attend.
Hi, I'm Luz Gomez, and I attend Southbridge Middle High School. I'm here to talk about the Bridge of Faith Youth Center. It's where we got a chance to express ourselves in many different ways. We want to help and influence many young people in this generation as possible. It kept us off the streets from this. We made good decisions as well. Thank you for your time. I'm Luz Gomez.
Thank you. Good evening. If you could state your name and school you attend.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Ortega, and I just wanted to talk about how the youth center should stay open because it's been a place where they helped me with my homework and projects, and they've helped me keep my grades up. The second reason why I think that you should keep the youth center open is because it's a place where they keep the youth off of the streets and into a safe educational place that we can be in. And it's been a place that has motivated me to do my best and to keep my grades up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, excuse me, Jennifer, what school do you attend? Which school do you attend?
Southbridge High School.
Thank you. Hi. Can you state your name and which school you attend, please?
Hi, my name is Grace Ortiz, and I attend Quabog Regional High School, Middle School. I'm going to be talking about the youth center. I really think that Southbridge should keep the youth center because it's where I get homework help, and they know how I feel. And it's where I make new friends, and that's where I come from school when I'm done with school. And school started a month ago, and we're still waiting for the youth center to open, but it still hasn't. And it's a safe place, and it's better than being on the streets of Southbridge. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the school committee this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the meeting to order at 7:08 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Congdon?
Present.
Mr. Lebo?
Present.
Dr. Page?
Present.
Mrs. Donovan?
Present.
Mrs. Quinney?
Present.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Present.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Present.
All present?
Thank you. Next, we have approval of minutes. We're going to look at the regular school committee meeting minutes of September 9th, 2014. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Congdon. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Quinney. Is there any discussion on the September 9th minutes? Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In Section 16, open session, following our executive session, Section A, the motion was made by Mrs. Congdon, seconded by Dr. Page to ratify the memorandum of agreement between the SEA Unit C Educational Assistance and the Southbridge School Committee as it states amended, and the motion was actually as approved.
Is there any other discussion on the minutes? Does anybody object to making that change, which I believe was verified by videotape? If there's no further objection, then we can vote on the motion to accept the minutes with that addition. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes?
Thank you. Next, we have the Committee of the Whole minutes. This was a special meeting on September 10th to discuss operating protocols and the like. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Congdon makes the motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Mrs. Quinney. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes?
Thank you. Next, we have the minutes of the School Committee Transition Workshop and Retreat of September 6, 2014. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Congdon makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Seconded by Mrs. Quinney. Is there any discussion on those meeting minutes? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes?
Thank you. Finally, as far as minutes go, we have the school committee, Southbridge High School Student Advisory Committee meeting. It was a joint meeting held September 17th, 2014. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Congdon makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Olivo. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Congdon?
I just wanted to say there were some grammatical changes that were made that were sent to the committee, so it would be,
Voting on those as
Yes.
amended. Did everybody receive those changes by email? If there's no objection, then we can approve those changes therein, or with the changes. So, roll call, please.
Mrs. Quinney?
Abstain?
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Abstained?
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
I have 5 yes, 2 abstentions.
Thank you. The vote carries. Next, under chairperson's announcements, before I get to some of the planned announcements, I just want to thank those of you who gave us some public input this evening, and just to explain for everybody's benefit, later on the agenda, we will be going into executive session to discuss the House of Destiny Ministries Youth Center lease proposal, and thereafter we are going to return to open session. Depending on what happens in executive session, we may be discussing that lease, we may not. We'll see how that goes, but I just wanted you to know that that will be taken up later on the agenda. So if you do plan on staying, it will be towards the end of the meeting. So thank you for that, and thank you all for your input this evening. You did a good job. So under my announcements, I just wanted to say that tonight's agenda was amended earlier today to include a provision for executive session under agenda item 15 that had been omitted earlier. The topic to be discussed was listed on the original agenda, but it was under a different provision of the open meeting law exception. So that's just been corrected to take care of that. The next thing I just wanted to mention is that we have some votes coming up this evening regarding creating a position and eliminating a position. I just wanted my school committee members to know that if they're so inclined, those votes can be combined. At the Southbridge Middle High School open house, I had the occasion to stop by a bunch of tables that were set up. And one of the tables that was there was on the community outreach program. I didn't quite know what that was, so I went up to talk to, turns out it was Ms. Peoples who was running the table that evening. And I was pleasantly surprised to learn, but surprised I also hadn't heard, that this program started many years ago with the purpose of sending cards to troops during the holiday season. And I was further surprised to learn that Southbridge Middle School, now Southbridge Middle High School, has been for many years the top school for sending cards to our troops overseas and all over the world. I didn't know that. I felt bad I didn't know about that. But what was good to know was that people were stopping by the table to learn about this program. And if anyone in the community would like to join the Southbridge Middle High School family in sending greetings to the men and women serving out of country in all parts of the world, please drop off greeting cards to the Southbridge Middle High School office by November 14th. You can place your card in an envelope, but do not address the envelope, and you can include your return address. The program will also accept donations of boxed holiday cards if you just somebody wanted to donate some boxed holiday cards. I didn't have time to include them on this agenda, but I would certainly like these, both Ms. Peoples and Mrs. Blake, perhaps to come and talk about this program, because it's quite an honor, I guess. We have some letters from high-ranking military officials thanking the students in the school for their work, so I thought that was impressive. And hopefully we can have them at a future meeting. On Wednesday, October 8th, from 6:30 to 7:30, there's a meeting for grade 9 parents and guardians, or parents or guardians of grade 9 students, rather. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss four-year planning, the Mass Core, and graduation requirements. So please put that on your calendar if you are the parent or guardian of a grade 9 student. And I'd also received in the mail this week an invitation from some members of the community who are putting together a symposium calling Partnering to Promote Youth Development in Our Communities, and I believe every member of the school committee may have received the same letter. So there's going to be a symposium at the YMCA on Thursday, October 9th from 4 to 6 p.m., and hopefully some of us will be able to attend that meeting. It's a joint community effort to come up with ways that we can improve opportunities for youth in our community, so I look forward to attending that. And finally, I'm sure Mr. Boisvert will talk about this a little bit, so I don't want to rain on his parade too much, but homecoming is this Friday night, September 26th, and the national anthem is at 6:55, the game begins at 7, and there's a halftime show, which maybe Mr. Boisvert will fill us in on in a minute. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll move right to him then. So you're up, Mr. Boisvert.
So this week at Southbridge Middle High School is homecoming. From September 22nd to the 26th is Spirit Week, where each day there's a theme and the teachers and the students dress up. Yesterday was Sports Day, today is Tie-Dye Day, tomorrow is Hawaiian Day, Thursday is Twin Day, and Friday is Class Color Day. On September 26th, there's a pep rally on the last block of the day, which will be from 1:14 to 2:15. After the pep rally at the game, there will be booths set up from 4 p.m. to the end of the third quarter. Students are free to enter the game from 4 to 5 and cannot leave unless they will have to repay to enter. The national anthem will be sung at 6:55 by the chamber choir, and the game starts at 7. The halftime show will be 15 minutes. The band will perform for 5 minutes. The cheerleaders will perform for 2 minutes. The dedication of the locker room to Mr. Santilli Sr. will be 3 minutes, and the homecoming court recognition will be 5 minutes. On September 27th, there will be a homecoming dance at the Southbridge Middle High School cafeteria from 7 to 10 p.m. The theme is a fall semi-formal. The tickets are $5 to be purchased in school and $7 at the door. Chips, cookies, soda, and water will be refreshments. The booths at the homecoming game: 10th grade will be selling Spanish rice and possibly have a dunk tank. The middle school honor society will be selling cupcakes. The 11th grade will be doing fried dough and Oreos. 12th grade will be doing cheesecakes, brownies, and a 50-50 raffle. The cheerleaders will be selling empanadas, pulled pork and sausage, and peppers. The drama club will be selling chili. The 9th grade class will be selling pizza. The Southbridge Credit Union will be advertising. Ms. Krikourian will be doing face painting. The 8th grade dance committee will be selling Southbridge merchandise, and the National Honor Society will be selling candy apples, and cross country will be selling chocolate snacks. For the National Honor Society, to kick off homecoming, we are having a raffle for Southbridge Middle High School apparel. Tickets are being sold at the middle high school all week, and during the first half of Friday's game, tickets are $1 for 1 ticket, $2 for 3 tickets, and $3 for 5 tickets. All proceeds will be going towards college-bound seniors, as well as local charities at the end of the year. The National Honor Society has begun its after-school tutoring program for any middle high school student that needs help and would like to drop in for tutoring. After-school tutoring takes place on Tuesdays from 2:20 p.m. to 3:20 p.m. in the library, and on Thursdays from 2:20 p.m. to 3:20 p.m. in room 252. At least 3 students will be on staff every day. The National Honor Society had its fall car wash and fundraiser at the Uno restaurant in Southbridge on Saturday, September 20th. The weather was great and the turnout was fair. During the weekend, the National Honor Society had an Uno dough raiser and began its raffle of Southbridge Middle High School apparel. 20% off Uno sales proceeds were donated to the National Honor Society. National Honor Society will be selling candy apples at its booth, and the candy apples will sell for $2, and for half an apple will be $1. The nurse has the mobile dentist coming. Permission slips were passed out to the students, and the clinic flu will be here for staff and students on October 20th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 8 is school committee reports. We'll start with the curriculum subcommittee. Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not have a report. However, I would like to announce that we have a curriculum subcommittee meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, September 24th at 6:30 p.m. in room M100 at 25 Cole Ave. Items on our agenda will be to approve the meeting minutes from our August 13th meeting. We'll take a look at, have a discussion on the content and implementation of our newly approved Accelerated Improvement Plan with our Director of Teaching and Learning, Ms. Cheryl Stanton. We'll also be provided an update on the district's ELL program, and we will also be provided with a review of the district's professional development initiatives for the month of September. So that's tomorrow evening, 6:30 p.m., room M100, 25 Cole Ave. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Mrs. Donovan, do you have anything to report under the Ad-Hoc Superintendent Evaluation Committee?
Yes, thank you. So we had a meeting of the whole a couple weeks ago, and at that meeting, by unanimous consent, an ad hoc superintendent evaluation committee was created. It will consist of 3 school committee members. At the present time, the members are myself, Mrs. Congdon, and Mr. Abrahamson. So, and I am serving as chair of that committee. So we had our first meeting last Wednesday morning, September 17th at 8:30 a.m. at the Cole Ave building. And present were myself, Mr. Abrahamson, and Mrs. Congdon. Basically, I began the meeting by informing the members that starting with the 2013-2014 school year, all Massachusetts school districts are required to implement a new educator evaluation model for all of their administrators, including their superintendents. So I went on to further state that this evaluation process is a 5-part cycle, which includes self-assessment, goal setting, implementation, a formative mid-cycle assessment, and an end-of-cycle summative assessment. I further noted that the tool itself will consist of 2 parts. One part consists of SMART goals, and the second part are 4 standards. The SMART goals, it is recommended from the Massachusetts model that there be 1 SMART goal pertaining to professional practice, 1 SMART goal pertaining to student learning, and 2 SMART goals that pertain to district improvement. Relative to the 4 standards piece that we need to look at separately, we need to take a look at effective professional practice by looking at instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. So we discussed all those features at the meeting. In addition to those, we need to pick 8 to 12 elements and indicators that will be attached to those standards as part of the overall rating of the superintendent. It's a very complex model. It is something new that the state requires. It's never been done here before, so we're taking our time to make sure that we do the best possible job that we can. In addition to the SMART goals and the 4 standards, we also need to create a list of what they call articles of evidence, and those will be the proof that we need to collect that the superintendent is in fact doing her job. Obvious artifacts of evidence will include our Accelerated Improvement Plan and her entry plan. So there will be others that we will add to that, but that's a starting point for us. The plan itself, or the cycle itself, is up to the discretion of the committee as to what the cycle will be, or when it will start and when it will end. Because of where we are, we have decided that we will use this current school year as our cycle. Some school districts use calendar years. Others break the year into different sections. However, we will use the school year for our cycle, and we agreed that that will, again, correspond to this school year. As such, we're shooting for our mid-cycle assessment to take place in January. And the difference between the mid-cycle assessment and the end-of-cycle summative assessment is that the mid-cycle assessment is more of a conversation. It's a point where the superintendent will sit with the school committee, review the progress that the superintendent has made up until that point. However, at the end of the cycle, when the end-of-cycle summative review evaluation comes into place, that will be written, and that will be a lot more descriptive, categorized, rated, that kind of thing. So that's where the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the assessment will take place at the end of the summative cycle. So all that taking place, we needed a starting point. So Mr. Abrahamson was kind enough to do a little research for us, and we found that there is an appendix within the Massachusetts model that tries to help school committees and superintendents tweak the process and the timelines if you have a new superintendent. And the definition of a new superintendent for this Mass model is anyone who has served 3 years or less. So obviously, with our current superintendent, she will be considered a new superintendent, and therefore some of her goals will be modified to suit the fact that she is a new superintendent. So we talked all about that, and then we looked at that appendix. We went through to see what goals were there, and we talked about different key actions and benchmarks that perhaps we could take from that, again, as a starting point, and tailor them to our district needs. So we did a little bit of work on that, and I have since forwarded that draft document to the superintendent. We will be meeting again tomorrow. Ms. Gardner will be present for that meeting, and it'll just be to provide feedback and further review, clarification, and address any issues that we need to address. Right now, our goal is to establish the 4 SMART goals, and then once that piece is completed, we'll move on to the second part of the evaluation tool and deal with the standards. So our meeting last week ended at 10 a.m., and our meeting for this Wednesday will take place at 9 a.m. in room M100 at 25 Colave. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Negotiations Subcommittee, Mrs. Quinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If there are no objections, I would request that I give my report following our return from executive session.
Any objections? There are none. Mrs. Quinney, you can give your report then.
Thank you.
Do you have a report as a Sped PAC Liaison?
I do have quite the report as the Sped PAC Liaison. The first item of information is that the Sped PAC is having a paint and social event this Saturday from 5 to 9 at the Knights of Columbus. Flyers such as this should have gone home in backpacks. It has all the information on it, but just in case it didn't make it to your house, 5 to 9, Knights of Columbus this Saturday. The cost is $35. It's an adults-only event. You'll be painting a picture, hopefully similar to the one displayed. And $15 of that $35 will be donated directly to the Sped PAC. If you would like to reserve a space, you need to call Jessica at 508-344-4055, and that's to reserve your spot, and then money will be taken at the door. So 5 to 9 this Saturday, paint and social, AKA paint and sip. The Sped PAC reviewed their survey results, and they had quite a good sampling of things that families are interested in and would participate in regarding trainings and events for kids. They did get some teacher and educational assistant feedback in that, so they're working to build their schedule for the upcoming year based on those survey results. Right now, they're looking at having a pumpkin painting for kids October 18th. The plan is from 1 to 4, but that is currently in the works. That is that. Their next meeting is October 16th in room M100. During discussion, there was discussion regarding a grant that had been facilitated through a member of the Sped PAC, and wanting a kind of a follow-up report. Who benefited from that grant? It was to be used for sensory integration training and supplies. So was it successful? How did it benefit the people that took it? Who took it? How are those strategies being implemented, and are they positively affecting kids? Also, part of that grant was for sensory integration supplies, and given some of the requests for Sped PAC donation money to be used for supplies was how and what supplies were bought and where they had been put. So that's something that they'd like some information regarding, and I will look into for them. The other discussion, they had a funding that they were looking to give to each of the buildings and received requests and are looking to meet those requests. Some were requests for iPads, others were for oral hygiene and personal hygiene items, which I believe a local dentist has donated two local dentists have donated those oral hygiene supplies, and when everything is solidified, I will certainly put out thank yous on behalf of the Sped PAC. So they're looking to get iPads for 2 of the buildings, some sensory supplies for another building, as well as those hygiene supplies for another. So the Sped PAC is working very hard to meet the needs of children with special needs in the district. So thank you to them, and that is all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Quinney. Mrs. Congdon, do you have a report of the Family and Community Engagement Subcommittee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not have a report. However, our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 6th at 6:30. Everyone in the district, as well as the community, is invited to attend that meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And did you have a report on the school committee, student advisory committee?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted for the public to be aware, I know we approved the minutes, but the Southbridge School Committee, as well as members of the Student Advisory Committee, met on Wednesday, September 17th at 7 a.m. at the Southbridge Middle High School. Just as Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 38M, that the school district shall meet at least once every other month during months that the school is in session, with a student advisory committee composed of students elected by the student body. So we met on that date, and members of the committee were myself, Mr. Abrahamson, Dr. Page, Mr. Levo, Mrs. McLaughlin, as well as the student council advisor, Mr. Carrero, and Principal Earls, and student council members, Callie Matthew, Ken Allard, Nadine Ramirez, Taylor Farraco, and Mr. Cameron Boisvert. We all introduced ourselves and discussed what our objectives would be. We discussed conferences that were available for the Student Advisory Council to attend, and Mr. Carrero is in the process of looking at those conferences so that the Student Advisory Council can get leadership training to bring back to the schools. We also discussed identifying guest speakers who the students would like to see at assemblies for the school, and the students all had different ideas, such as leadership lectures on how students can be better leaders, different alumni that had graduated from Southbridge that could share stories about how they succeeded in life and their process in doing that. We talked about recommending Quinsigamond Community College regarding opportunities so that the students can have a clear understanding of the path they need to take to be prepared for jobs. Different statistics of going to college and getting a high school diploma of students in Southbridge, real-world assemblies on how the students can present themselves, from dress as well as resume building, career fairs, and different assemblies for the school. So there was a lot in that discussion. And we also discussed the month of the young adolescent, and the students also stated that last year the Student Council's goal was to bring back and stabilize tradition. This year it's to link both the middle school and the high school together to become more of that one school. Mr. Carrero said that he took on the student council for both the high school and the middle school. So the middle school will also be having a student council structure similar to the high school. Different ideas that the students had mentioned were maybe to do a buddy system between the middle school and high school students, and then that they were implementing that Spirit Week. We discussed a meeting schedule for the year, and it was discussed that the third Wednesday of the month would work well, but Mr. Carrero was going to discuss that with the students. During open discussion, we asked the students to look into the cell phone and dress code policy to get feedback from the students, so to see if our policies that the students would agree to and that they could enforce and how it was being enforced. They talked about keeping that building school pride for the students, and the meeting was adjourned at 7:34. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And just briefly, as far as the policy subcommittee, we haven't met since the last meeting, so there's no report this evening, but just the next policy subcommittee meeting will be held Wednesday, October 1st, 2014, 6:30 p.m. in room M115, 25 Cole Avenue. There are no specific presentations scheduled for this evening. Next, there is the report of the Finance Director. Good evening, Mr. Osborne.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So I think the committee will recall a few meetings ago, I think it was 2 meetings ago, we were asked to provide an update on the end-of-year report progress, and that's what I think I'm going to give now. As we start the end-of-year report, there's absolutely some challenges as you come in new to the system. And the very kind of initial challenge is understanding how all the data is categorized and creating more or less a crosswalk to the state system, from our data to the state system. So with that said, at this point, we've completed all of the data related to the general fund across 3 of the 6 schedules. The report is divided up into a series of schedules. I won't get into any detail on all of the schedules. We've requested and are receiving data from the town. There is some data that we get from the town regarding some of their allocations and things like that. We're in the process of compiling grants and revolving fund information now. And then we will also be compiling SPED allocations, working with the SPED department to do that. I believe we're on process. We're in process to make the October 31st deadline of our extension. I've recently shared the work we've done to date with 2 separate mentors, one from West Springfield and one from Quabog, each of them having 20-plus years of experience in the field, and both have indicated they feel like the report's on track, that we're progressing and doing the things we need to do to be successful.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Osborne? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you, Aaron, for coming in and taking that over.
Sure.
And I guess I would just like to request that when it is completely complete, if we could receive a copy of it, or at least see what it is what you submit to the state, because it's something that we have never been privy to, and it's very important that we're privy to that type of information. So at some point, access to that information.
We will surely regale you with it.
Thank you.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last week I had the pleasure of attending the open house at Southbridge Middle High School, and I'll talk more about that later. During the course of the evening, I visited a computer classroom, and I was happy to see many new computers for our students to use. On closer examination, though, I noticed that several of the computers, I think about half of them, did not have any power source. They couldn't be plugged in, and all available outlets were taken. It's sort of like a kid getting his license and saying, "Can I have the keys to the car?" Sure. There's no gas, and the battery's dead. So my question, and I have already told him that I would be asking this to the finance director, is, do we have money in the budget to rectify the situation?
We are aware, we've recently aware that there is a power issue in that room, that there may be, that room has only had half that many computers in the past. So that's really only come to our attention. I don't believe it's entirely a budgetary issue. We have a full-time electrician on staff, so if it's possible to hook up additional power to that room, it's altogether possible that we could facilitate that.
Thank you. And, well, Madam Chair, I would then ask that we have an update on this situation, perhaps on the next agenda item.
Thank you. Did you want to say anything, Ms. Goodman?
I would just follow up with what Aaron said, that we are aware of it. I know that Mr. Stolzak went and took a look at the room, and we are working on that. Sometimes with technology, it's not that you can just put it in as many computers or as much hardwire as you need for the computers. So we are even thinking about possibly a different location for that where it would be possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, are you all set, Mr. Osborne? I'm sorry. Did
Sure.
anybody else have questions for Mr. Osborne? Okay. Next, we have the report of the superintendent, so I'll turn it over to Ms. Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's going to be a little longer for me tonight than usual. I'd like to start by saying in the last week I've enjoyed some wonderful activities. I went to the football game on Friday night. I love football. If you know anything about the South, it's sort of the other religion. And it was really nice to see people out. I love that we play on Cole Avenue. It has such a historical feel to it. So Ms. Stanton and I were there. The entire high school administrative staff was there, and they were working the game. You know, they were around, they were talking to students, and so I really want to commend them for that. I went to the volleyball game yesterday. It was Southbridge High School's first ever volleyball game, and we beat Uxbridge. So I would like to congratulate Coach Tiani Fredette, who's a Southbridge girl herself, and it was just exciting. Last year, a group of girls went to Terry Wallace and said that they would love to have a volleyball team. This year, Athletic Director Ashley Cabrera made sure that that happened, and it was just really exciting. And from there, Mr. Solzak and Ms. Earls and I went to the band fundraiser at Public House, and wow, it was full and it was good. And I think that there's another one, I'm sorry I don't have the date, but would love to see all of you, so we'll make sure everyone knows when it is. The next thing that I would like to talk about is MCAS. The scores came out on Friday. We had them for a few weeks, but it's called that they are embargoed. And until Friday, we're not really allowed to share that data. There's some things where you're making sure that they're right, that they have all of our students. They hit the newspaper on Saturday before we really had a chance to talk to anyone about them. The numbers that you see when you see them in the newspaper are hard numbers. They're real. They're what they are. They're where our scores are. But the numbers don't always tell the story of where we are in terms of progress. So in 2 weeks, I would like to give a report on our MCAS numbers and what they mean to Southbridge. That's not to say that this is going to be a dog and pony show to say that everything is fantastic, because it's not. You know that, I know that. When you look at numbers, they don't lie. But when you look at numbers over the past few years, you start to see a picture of it. Today we had our district leadership team meeting, and the principals and the directors who were in this meeting were, I'm not even sure of what the right word to use, but we went through a presentation, much of it that I did send to school committee this weekend, and we were saddened. We were saddened by the scores and by the progress that this district has made, because there's some fantastic teachers here. And I learned that last year when I started working on the accelerated improvement plan, and we brought in the IRSs and we brought in teachers who were extremely skilled. And I can tell you that we have a group of administrators now, and I believe I can speak for them and say that it's our mission that we are going to improve greatly. We had some improvement this year, but our students deserve it, and our teachers deserve it. Our teachers deserve to stop being hammered because of progress. And we have a staff of administrators and IRSs and deans and teachers and paras and tutors and all of the staff that help provide our schools. We have people that we want to stay here, And we will make a difference if you give us the opportunity to make a difference. And as I said, in 2 weeks we will report. We will give you the full report. You can go look at the numbers if you want to at the DESE, but there's more to it than just looking at a number, because you're thinking about a child sitting in a seat somewhere. The other thing that I want to say about MCAS, and I guess just about our children, is last year, late in the year, and I can't remember what month it was, we had a guidance presentation. And some of the school committee members became a bit heated with guidance when they weren't able to answer questions that they had hoped would have been answered. And I'm not here to throw hammers at anybody, but we learned then that there were some definite issues that we had in the guidance that our students were receiving. And at that point, we started making changes. And we kind of say in our office all the time, in central office, that Southbridge is kind of like peeling an onion. There seems to always be another layer. This year at the high school, middle school, with the new administrative staff led by Principal Earls, we hired a guidance counselor who was here tonight, Ms. Melanie Curran, who immediately went to work. The week before school started, she was basically working for free for us, and she worked literally night and day. And in doing so, she learned some things that to us were absolutely horrifying. We learned that there were juniors last year who are now seniors who had had the opportunity to retake MCAS, and they were never provided that opportunity during school. We take responsibility for this. I looked at the administrative staff today, and we sort of made a pledge to each other that most of us have not been here very long. Some have not been here very long at all. But we accept the challenge of what has happened in this district. Many of the things that weren't on our charge, weren't on our watch, but they are on our watch now. And because of that, we are paying attention to them. And I said when I started here last year, and I continue to affirm that we will be transparent. We will tell you the truth. It's not easy to sit here and say that we had students who should have been given 2 opportunities last year to take MCAS, but we missed those opportunities. But that happened. But with the people that we have put in place, with Ms. Earle's staff and with Ms. Curran, this will not happen again. I'd like to read a statement to you, and then I will give you some hard numbers. In preparing for the fall MCAS retakes for grade 11 and 12 students, which includes the development of educational proficiency plans for students and a review of graduation requirements, which are credits and core classes, we identified issues that needed immediate attention. We discovered that, number 1, students were not scheduled with enough credits to meet state requirements. Number 2, students were not given multiple opportunities to retake MCAS. Number 3, EPP students were not developed for students. EPP plans were not developed for students who scored needs improvement in grade 10. As a result of this discovery, the following steps were taken to provide immediate corrective actions in addition to ensuring these issues did not occur in the future. Students were rescheduled to ensure that all students had core courses that meet graduation requirements. Grade 11 and grade 12 who need to retake MCAS have been identified and scheduled for retakes. A remedial tutoring program has been developed and has begun as of 9/22. Letters were sent to parents of all affected students identifying the problem and outlining our course of action. The following number of students were affected. In grade 12, we have 105 students. Of those 105 students, 43 students have passed all 3 sections of MCAS. 24 students require only an EPP to be written. Pardon me. 38 students need to retake 1 to 3 parts of the MCAS test and need EPPs in other subjects. In grade 11, we have 145 students. They will have their 2 opportunities this year to retake MCAS if it's within their right or if they follow an EPP. Currently, we have 58 students who have passed all 3. We have 37 students who require only an EPP and 50 students who need to take 1 to 3 parts of the MCAS and, depending on their success, an EPP. Students should have been placed on EPPs last school year after scoring between a 220 to a 238 on the math and/or ELA MCAS. Remediation for these students included schedule changes designed to address deficiencies, weaknesses, and improve scholastic performance. EPPs are being written by the department heads of ELA and math. Under the supervision of the building principal, director of pupil personnel services, and guidance at the middle high school, Work is ongoing which aligns state and local data systems to ensure accurate identification of students requiring either retakes or the EPPs. And I don't know if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Gardner? Could you just explain for the public what an EPP is?
I can. I'm sorry, my allergies are kind of kicking in tonight. An EPP, as I said, is an educational proficiency plan. What an EPP does is if a student falls in the range of 220 to 238, 240 is a passing score on MCAS. If they fall within that range, they can retake either the math or an ELA core curriculum course, and if they pass that course, they do not have to retake an MCAS. So it's not the days of you absolutely cannot graduate if you never pass an MCAS course. If you fall below that, those are our retakers. So if you fall within that, an EPP can help you get a real diploma, not just a certificate of attendance.
Does anybody have any questions for the superintendent on this? I do. Do we know how many students are going to take advantage of the after-school tutoring?
They started on Monday. I do not have a number. Ms. Curran is here. I'm not trying to put her on the spot. I don't know. I know that we have 3 sections of math and 2 sections of ELA, but I do not know how. Ms. Curran, do you have an idea? Can you come up?
We wanted to call the parents of each one of these students affected. We couldn't until the official release, which just happened on Friday. Letters went home to these parents. We have had students that already began yesterday on the tutoring program. Our goal, honestly, is we want 100% of these kids at these tutoring programs. We want them to pass the MCAS. So over the course of the next couple of days, I believe there are going to be teams of us at the high school that are going to be contacting these parents and encouraging them to have these kids come to the tutoring programs.
Thank you. Perhaps we could get updates on this as it progresses, with some numbers of kids taking advantage, so we can find out if that's working. Also, is there going to be a Saturday program too? Have we decided that or no?
We are working on a Saturday program. I believe we were thinking for the spring for that, but Ms.
I
Carmen?
believe that was for the biology that we were going to try the Saturday one for.
Okay.
We thought we'd get more kids coming in, you know, when it's not nice weather type of thing. So I think, if I'm wrong, Superintendent, was it Tuesday through Thursday? Monday
Correct.
through Thursday, we were going to run the sessions.
Right.
And that's why we started yesterday.
Right. And we're looking at the biology being held in later winter or earlier spring, and it would probably be held at Cole Avenue where it's easier for students to get to.
And I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, but busing or after, like how long do the sessions go? And then are they able to take one of the later buses, or are we going to organize some sort of transportation?
The sessions are, for the after-school sessions that are ongoing right now, they're for 1 hour, like we said, 4 days a week. Some of the children might only have to take the math portion of it because maybe they passed the ELA or they have an EPP in place for the ELA. So they do take the after-school buses home.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment. This is the first time that the public has heard this information. This is not the first time that school committee has heard this information. And sadly, the way that I met you was as a result of this, and how tragic that is. I was so angry when I got this news. Completely unacceptable. Because at the end of the day, who is it about? It's about the kids that need to make a life for themselves. It's about the kids that need to graduate. It's about the kids that need to pass a test. And here we are again. And I am not one for pointing fingers. I'll take responsibility. I'm sitting up here so people can look at me and say, Donovan, it came under your watch. Okay, it did. Absolutely. But I am furious about it. I'm deeply saddened by it, and I'm troubled by it. But the one great thing that I took away from this is that the day that I was in the superintendent's office and this news came down, Immediately, and I mean immediately, Pat Gardner, Cheryl Stanton, you, Miss Curran, and Melissa Earls, within seconds, were at that table figuring out how we're going to make this happen. The whiteboard came out, the dry erasers came out, the schedules came out, anything that you had at your fingertips came out to come up with a solution. And it took a week to get this into place. And I commend you for that, and I thank you for that, because if this error had not been found, what would have happened? I don't even know the answer to that question. And I have faith that the people that are now seeing to this, that this A gets addressed, B gets rectified, I have faith that it won't happen again. And I have faith. I hope that nobody lets me down and makes me eat my words somewhere down the road. We can't keep doing this to these kids. They only get one shot. So it's a kick in the gut, and I'm very saddened by it, but I wanted to thank you personally, from me, personally, Kara Donovan, mother, school committee member, for finding it, for being the whistleblower, and for fixing it. And to Ms. Gardner and to Ms. Stanton as well. Thank you, sincerely. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And this is not going to happen again, and that's how come we were all at that meeting. And once we figured it out, I mean, it was pretty instantaneous that the news was shared with the key people, and we went right to work in finding solutions for this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Dr. Page?
I just have a quick question as to what is the normal protocol for identifying this kind of thing? This seems to me this should be part of a business as usual kind of thing, and so I'm curious to know where the failure was. I mean, I understand, you know, we're reacting to a situation, but it seems to me that there should be, if we need to do something to install some kind of protocol or procedure that wasn't there, or I think in order to really solve this going forward, we need to understand where the breakdown was, because like you say, there's a lot of people in this district that have been around for a while. Some are new, yes, but this is kind of an enigma to me.
If I might, the protocols and procedures are there, and this is going to sound harsh, and I don't know any other way to say it. Something that I learned from Superintendent Nimberco was, he said we hire people for judgment. MCAS, if you follow the guide, is very, very easy, to the point of it says read here. It says put it in this order. We had people working in our schools. A principal has to sign off saying that everything is done right, everything is as it should be. And that's why it was not caught by the DESE. It went in saying that we had done everything right, that everything was in order, that everything was well and good. And as a high school principal, I did it many times. As an elementary and as a middle school principal, I did it many times. I never had a superintendent come and check on me because I did it right. And I guess in looking back, and I've told this administration many times, they're going to suffer for the sins of others because I hover over them and I check on them and check to see where they are and what they're doing. And it's not because they're not fantastic, it's because they are. But the bottom line, once again, is that nobody was watching. But in this case, people were not honest. And I know that there are people out there that this is going to hurt their feelings or make them angry, but people were not honest. They signed and said that something had been done. Quite frankly, I was at the high school, middle school, I think it was yesterday, today is only Tuesday, and we were looking to just do some double checking, and there are records in MCAS that you should keep for years, and we could not find those records. And moving forward, you know, where everything will be done right, and again, that's a pledge, and I understand that if you live in Southbridge and you're a parent, you have heard this and heard this and heard this. And I'm asking you and I'm telling you that with the administrative staff that you have now, with the principals you have, with the people that we have in central office, we know that now is the time. I mean, we can't go any longer. We could have not told anybody about this, and we could have swept it under the rug, and children would have suffered, and we could have done exactly what we're doing, and we didn't have to be this forthcoming. But that's not who we want to be, and it's not how we want to run things. And that's an excellent question, and that's an honest answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Did you have something else?
I have a number of other things.
Yes, please.
Because of this, and yet because of another thing that's not quite MCAS, but it's because of scheduling, we have learned, and I've received many emails from parents, and I've emailed them back explaining as much as I could of where we were. And having been at the high school, middle school, and having just a week or so ago watched a physical education class go out to the fields, I have learned that in social studies, English, and physical education, we are incredibly overcrowded in those classes. What we learned in social studies, and again, something I believe that Ms. Curran is responsible for in a very good way, is that a couple of years ago, Mass Common Core changed to where students had to take another social studies, and just the route to a high school graduation had changed. And the scheduling for this year for our juniors and seniors had not been done properly. And we had, especially our seniors, which of course we're currently concerned about, we have a little bit of time on the juniors, but we learned that they had not been scheduled for enough social studies classes to meet mass requirements to graduate. So in doing that, we've had to do a lot of shifting in scheduling and in creating classes. Currently, in social studies and English, as I've said, we have students who are on the EPP who have to take an additional core English class, and then our PE classes are just huge. We have classes that have upwards of 40 kids in them, 40 students. We have PE classes that are over 40. So at this time, I would like to ask if I can request a budget meeting in the very near future to discuss funding for 3 very, very needed positions at the high school, middle school.
Yep, we can work to schedule that. I think that is extremely important. I've heard those same complaints and concerns, and sometimes you hear things like, well, it is what it is, it's set for the year. That's unacceptable. We need to move on this and move on it fast. Kids are being affected today. When do they need a solution to their problem? Today. So the sooner we can do this, the better. So we'll work on that right away.
Now, a couple more things.
Please.
I'm sorry.
No.
I believe there's a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs.
Thank
Quinney.
you, Madam Chair. Through you to Ms. Gardner. Regarding the Common Core change in requirements, I do recall getting a form from the middle high school saying what the new requirements were. Did we provide training for those people scheduling in order to ensure that they were aware of those new demands and how to ensure that all students met minimum requirements prior to graduation?
What happened last school year is, this is, I think, my 14th month in Southbridge, and when I started last year, the beginning of last year was chaotic because scheduling was not done. What we did this past spring was we worked heavily on the program of study to bring it up to where it could actually carry the Mass Common Core. And when we were doing that, we realized that, I hate to say the word no one, but no one that I talked to at the high school, middle school had seen the grid. And so we made sure that that went into the new program of studies and into the handbook so that when students were being scheduled this year, it was there. And I know that Ms. Curran herself has met with almost every student to go over it and to fill out that grid. It's an easy grid that when a student starts 9th grade, you start filling it in so they don't get left behind somewhere, so they can be very proactive. Parents who look online at the program of study or the student handbook can find that grid, and it was not in before. Prior to my being here, I don't know if they followed it or not. I would say by looking at scheduling and the catching up that we're having to do with classes, it was not done.
Thank you.
I have a couple more things.
Okay, continue.
Okay. My third thing, or my 15th thing, I'm not sure now. I've been keeping up with staffing because that's always a question. Our staffing right now, we have done quite well in it. As I said earlier, there's a couple of positions that we had not hired just because of timing. We are going to fill them now as a parent liaison at Eastford Road. It's been on, but we've been trying to get teachers in front of children. And we had a resignation from a speech-language pathologist, and we have filled that with a consultant from our collaborative. Another that we have done, we have made co-directors of the food services program with 2 people who have been working with us for a number of years, and by making co-directors with people who are already in place and providing them with a stipend, we saved about $35,000. And so that's the staffing update. At this time, I would like to recognize Ms. Cheryl Stanton, who is going to give us a quick update on Focus on Results, our professional development program, and she is going to introduce our new ELL/literacy instructional research specialist.
Thank you. Good evening. I did want to say thank you to the students who arrived for public comment. It is always a pleasure to be reminded of the student voices that are out there and the work that we do and the decisions that we make and how they are affected by them. And to our student rep, you garnered Mr. Osborne's attention with the detail of the food that will be at homecoming, so thank you for that. I don't think I've ever seen him quite so awake during the school committee session, so congratulations, and I expect a report on homecoming food later.
Thank you.
So to focus on results, we did have a Focus on Results Institute this past week, and the focus there is to empower school-based teams to make the instructional decisions that impact teaching and learning in classrooms. So that institute, teachers and leaders, instructional leaders in the buildings, they read articles on current research, and they make decisions based on data specific to their schools in moving teaching and learning. One of the things they did was revise the instructional focus, and one of the things that the principal leadership did this year was write our district instructional focus, which I would like to read to you. Our district focus is to ensure high expectations for student learning through expert core instruction and challenging curriculum provided for every student in every classroom every day to show improved results. So that is our district focus. Each school has its own focus, and that's based on the needs that they see in their schools. Many of them are focused on reading comprehension, which is a critical component for student success and student learning. And then based on their instructional focus, they work on best practices. So best practices are chosen based on the data that they see and the needs of their students. And those range from 3 to 5 every year. And the idea is to provide professional development to the ILT, the instructional leadership team who has chosen the best practices, and then ensure that those practices are given in every classroom every day for every child. And that unifies the approach to whole school reform. So that is the report, I guess, on Focus on Results. So if there's any questions, I can. No?
Mrs. Congdon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Ms. Stanton. Can we get copies of all of that? The district focus and the school focus and all of what you just talked about? So we can have that? That would be great to have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Page?
Thank you. Could you give us a little bit of an idea on what is the structure of a best practice, or what kind of data are used to determine what is a best practice, maybe in some type of elaborative example?
Okay, so for example, at the middle high school, when we're looking at MCAS data, and a percentage of students do not attempt an open response question, the instructional leadership team will have the discussion around why is it that so many of our students are not even attempting an open response? Is it because they can't read and understand the text that the open response is addressing, or is it that they are having trouble actually writing a response and an answer to a question? So the team will come together and look at, do we need to address reading comprehension, and what are the best reading comprehension strategies that we can use in classrooms in all content? For example, do we teach students to make connections to text? So do they make text-to-text connections? Do they make text-to-world connections? And will that be a strategy for them to improve their reading comprehension? Or do we look at it and say, no, this is really a written output issue, so we need to to have students use a protocol for answering open response questions specifically, and we will practice that and train all our staff to use it in their classrooms, and therefore students have sort of a repetitive experience with, this is how I answer an open response. It's kind of like, think back to your 5-paragraph essay. You know, you were trained, it was an introduction, it was 3 paragraphs, it was a conclusion, bang, you can write it out, you know, in any stressful situation. It's like that. So the idea is to find those research-based practices that are tied to the data that they're seeing in MCAS or their formative assessments across the school.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Ms. Stanton. Ms. Stanton, I just wanted some clarification on the instructional, or the composition of the instructional leadership teams. Is there a team per school? And if so, how many make up that team? And then do those separate school teams get together as a district and
Sure, great question.
Communicate amongst
So the
each other?
instructional leadership teams are at every building. Every building has one. It's made up of the principal and the assistant principal, typically. And it's also made up of, in this district, instructional resource specialists, so your IRSs, and then several teachers throughout the school. So they make the foundation of the team, and they are the ones that make the decisions at the school-based level. But because we are level 4, we bring those teams together and provide training around effective instructional leadership at the building level. How do you get instructional practices in every classroom every day? How do you get that commitment to a focus on teaching and learning in classrooms? So when we bring the instructional leadership teams together, they receive the professional development, they receive the support of a consultant from Focus on Results. Pat has worked with them, I've worked with them as well. We have several leaders in the district who have worked specifically with this consulting group, so they are well versed, and they take that message back to their schools.
So how often do you meet as a group?
I think we're meeting 6 times, I think, this year, and it's a continuation of last year's, or 7.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Quinney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Ms. Stanton. I can, sort of piggybacking off of Dr. Page's question. We have this data, we implement best practices. How do we assess if those best practices are meeting the needs? Is it the next round of MCAS, or are there things in between?
Great question. Through the work on Focus on Results, we do have interim assessments that are built into the school year, so we're not waiting until the next MCAS round to decide if our changes are impactful. The other thing is through the state evaluation system, we do have to have district-determined measures in place, and those are being created this year, and those will be implemented pretty much quarterly, and that meets our goal of the AIP as well, to have interim assessments ongoing so that we're not waiting until, you know, September of the next year to make a decision if what we're doing is working and effective.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Dr. Page?
Madam Chair, I'd like to ask one follow-up
Yes,
question.
please.
Is there a way to sort of dissect the MCAS results in any of the categories in any kind of way that would enable us to better understand where the real limitations of our students are?
Sure.
Because we see these reports, it's sort of, you know, district-wide, grade level, categorizations according to, you know, Sped, whatever. But in terms of, like, is there a way that the questions are structured, or, you know, an individual breakdown? You understand what I'm saying?
I
so
do.
We can see, you know, to target, what's the root of the problem here? Because we seem to be just going nowhere.
Yep. So one of the things that I think the new building principals at our district level leadership team meetings are talking about is how we're looking at data. One of the things that, or one of the reports that's most impactful to look at is the item analysis for MCAS. So that is a standard by standard look at where our students are performing at the grade level. You can even go deeper and get into individual student answers and where their struggles are. But the item analysis gives us that school-wide and that grade level approach to say, to kind of answer the questions around, is this an instructional issue? Is it a curriculum issue? Did we not teach it yet? If we taught it, why are so many of our students not able to perform given this question? Is it an issue where our students aren't able to understand the question? And all of that work happens at the instructional leadership level. It also happens at department chairs, and at the elementary school level, it's happening at the grade level meetings. So as the schools are starting to organize with focus on results and a whole school approach, data has become part of every agenda, and that's built into the AIP as well, that we're giving feedback to grade level teams based on their agendas. Is data being used? How is it being used? And are we making instructional decisions based on it?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Do I need to take a chair?
We're on the topic. So one of the things that's kind of astonishing to me as a person looking at this is to see that I would imagine we have such a high percentage of students in the sort of warning failing category at many grade levels across many subjects. And so it's hard for me to imagine, of course I'm not privy to student report cards and so forth, that these students are receiving D's and F's on their report cards every term or whatever. And so to me, there should be some kind of alignment between what we're teaching, what we're testing on as a matter of routine instruction and assessment that should somehow correlate with the frameworks that the MCAS is meant to test on. And so I'm wondering if can we learn something about what is or is not effective about our routine assessment practices and our routine testing practices that we can learn from. Because, I mean, the worst thing is if a student's warning and failing or whatever in math, grade 5, and they're getting A's on their report card, then there's that point's a problem. And so are we looking into those kinds of things to see if there's some additional information we can extract and see where some of the limitations may be?
You know, as Ms. Gardner said, when you come to Southbridge, it feels like an onion. You just keep sort of peeling back the layers. Once you get a look at the systems and how they're built and how they're functioning, and you see that they're not quite supporting the learning that you're looking for, you have to rebuild the systems. So those exact things that you're talking about, those are our next steps. So making sure that we are taking a look at are our principals driving home the questions about what does the data tell us about teaching and learning in the classrooms? And when our systems are stable and support that foundation, then we ask the right questions and the right decisions can be made. But when you've had a sort of unstable leadership and comings and goings and staff, we are mentoring 58 brand new teachers first 2 years. That's astronomical to try and mentor and get a one-to-one mentor for each one of those people, and to keep those people here and to train them well and to provide them with the support that they need. You need to have stable systems to get to that point that you're talking about, and that's my goal, is to spend the next several years stabilizing the systems, building the systems so that they are supporting the teachers in effective ways, and not that it's an exercise in compliance in any way, but it actually impacts the work that we do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Gardner.
I'll finish at the end, because I think I'll just make a statement.
Can I address my introductions as well?
Yeah,
or do you want to finish?
No, go ahead. I'll finish at the end.
Okay, so it is with great pleasure. I know that the ELL student population and literacy has been a critical concern for the school committee, and so it is with great pleasure that I would like to announce today the hiring of our ELL .5 literacy IRS, who's been working district-wide. Araceli Escueda comes to us from Texas. That's where the majority of her ELL experience has been, and also the Holyoke Public Schools, where she has done literacy work. And we affectionately refer to her as Chelly because sometimes we can't get her first name quite right. So Chelly joins us, and I couldn't be more pleased and proud of the work so far. She is working in every single school, looking at every single student whose home language survey came back as not English, and making determinations about our system and how we intake those students, how we assess those students, and how we place those students, and we will be looking at curriculum over the next month. So, Shelley, thank you for coming to Southbridge, and welcome.
So do you want to say something? Can I have her say something? I wasn't sure. She wants to come up.
Hi.
Hello, welcome. Didn't know if you wanted to say anything. You have an opportunity to just say, introduce
Well,
yourself.
if y'all have any questions, I'll answer them.
Okay. Are there any questions?
You are from Texas, aren't you?
I am from Texas.
I don't think so at this time. I
Okay,
think
we're delighted to have her. She has come in and gone straight to work, and I rarely see her because she's always in the school. She's never sitting, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It'd be good to have an update at some.
If I can just make a closing remark. I know the MCAS results aren't what we want. I think in many ways they're what we expected. What I would like to do just very quickly, and you can't see them, but every week to the school committee meetings now, our administrative team comes. It's not just because I make them. Tonight, Emily Mantilla from Charlton Street is representing their school, and I just wanted to take a minute to thank Emily, Mary Skripczak, Jeff Coggins, and just some teachers that pop off the top of my head, and they're many. Sue Ferbrata, and I'm totally going blank right now because I'm trying to do it. But there are a number of teachers who have been in this district for many years who had held this district together. Judy Canoyer, a lot of teachers that I have people come up and say, they're the best teacher my child ever had. And I want to thank them, and I'm hoping at some point that maybe we could bring to school committee those teachers that have made a 10-plus year contribution. At opening day this year, I asked teachers in years of 10, 20, 30 to stand up and be recognized. And there are some teachers that have really stuck in here when the grass may have been greener on the other side. So I think that my thank you tonight is to those of you who have stayed. I know that Emily's made a huge contribution at Charlton Street, and it shows, especially this year at MCAS, and we'll take a look at that. So again, MCAS will improve, our schools are improving, and we need all of you to believe in us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mrs. Donovan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Superintendent. I just have one question relative to the distribution of scores. When will individual students or families be known of their own child's score of the MCAS? Do those sent home? Is that through guidance? I'm not sure how does that work?
They will be sent home through guidance with them just coming out of embargo on Friday. Again, I'll put Ms. Curran on the spot. And do you know the plan for getting them out?
I believe that we get reports from the DESE that are mailed home. That doesn't seem, usually it's extremely timely when we get those. I don't want to see this going out to the families in January when we receive the printouts from them. The children we're concerned about right now are the ones that are needing to retake the MCAS exams. So those are the ones that we're trying to put together teams for, to have phone calls made home to those individual parents, so that way we can get the kids into those tutoring sessions for the retakes. So that's our plan over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Congdon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Superintendent, kind of a follow-up on Mrs. Donovan's question. Not only with the middle school, high school, but even elementary school students, will guidance do the same thing? And so that's my first question. Will guidance also be sending home the results for that? And the second question being, what about the students in warning and failing for these elementary grade levels too? What is the process that'll be put in place for them?
Well, again, we're going to be looking, yes, to go back to your first question, the IRS's guidance and the principals in the elementary schools will all be a part of letting parents know and letting students know what those scores are. As I said, they just came out of embargo on Friday, so we really couldn't talk about them openly until Monday. So those will be coming soon, and we will be offering some after-school activities for, after-school opportunities for elementary students for ELA and for math. And as well, we have intervention teams, response to intervention teams and groups that will be addressing the standards that we have not done well in from grades 3 through grades 10.
Thank you. One more question, or more of a comment. I am just maybe hoping that we can get all of these MCAS results to the families, students, parents, prior to parent-teacher conferences, which are being held in November. So maybe those can be conversations that the teachers can have with the parents in regards to their children's MCAS scores.
I feel certain that they will be out well before then.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to move on to Agenda Item 12, which is School Committee Actions. Agenda Item 12A is the third reading and adoption of Policy File JICI, Possession or Use of Weapons. Mrs. Quinney?
Madam Chair, I ask that unanimous consent that the third reading be waived and the Policy File JICI, Possession or Use of Weapons, be adopted.
Thank you. Is there any objection to waiving the reading and adopting File JICI, Possession or Use of Weapons? Seeing none, by unanimous consent, Policy File JICI, Possession or Use of Weapons is adopted. Next, we have Agenda Item 12B, the third reading and adoption of Policy File FF, Commemoration of Facilities. Mrs. Quinney.
Madam Chair, I ask that unanimous consent that the third reading be waived and that Policy File FF, Commemoration of Facilities, be adopted.
Thank you. Is there any objection to Mrs. Quinney's motion? Seeing none, then please note by unanimous consent, Policy File FF, Commemoration of Facilities, we waived the reading and adopted by unanimous consent that policy. Thank you. Next is Agenda Item 12C, a vote to revoke Policy File EFD, School Meal Charging. Mrs. Quinney, is that a hand?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask that unanimous consent that Policy File EFD, School Meal Charging, be revoked.
Thank you, Mrs. Quinney. Is there any objection to this? Seeing none, Policy File EFD, School Meal Charging, has been revoked by unanimous consent of the school committee. Next, we have Agenda 12D, vote to replace the Mapping Club at Southbridge Middle High School with the Magic Club.
So moved.
As motion made by Mrs. Quinney, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Donovan. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Quinney.
Does the Mapping Club currently function?
Ms. Gardner, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, one of the things of being completely honest, I believe the Mapping Club has not existed for some time. Last year, the Magic Club did exist, and I don't know if it pretended to be the Mapping Club or quite how it was done, but it is the second year of the Magic Club, actually.
Thank you. Mrs. Donovan?
I can clarify that only because I have personal experience with both. The Mapping Club did exist last year. I believe it was Mr. Weinberg. Yeah, he did a great job. My son Evan was a part of that, and they made maps as long as the day is long, and it was an incredible process. The Magic Club was a club also last year run by Nate LeMay, and Nate has offered to be advisor to this club again. The Magic Club is not what you think. He doesn't teach magic tricks and show kids how to pull rabbits out of hats. The Magic Club is it's a card game. It's like a trading card game that requires strategy similar to chess. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. LeMay has about 25 students that meet on Wednesdays, and this is what they do. So I do not know if Mr. Weinberg is continuing with the Mapping Club. My guess is that he is not. So perhaps that is being taken off the roster, and the Magic Club did exist, and I think it's just reaffirming the fact that the Magic Club should be a legitimate club at the middle high school. Thank you.
Ms. Gardner.
I apologize for not knowing that. I'm
okay.
guessing that he was not compensated for that. So if there were students who participated in that, I don't want to take that away, so perhaps we could at least put on hold the mapping club until we see if there are students who are interested.
Okay.
So do we want to amend the motion, restate the motion? What would we like to do here? Mrs. Quinn.
Madam Chair, I move to amend the motion to replace Mapping Club at SMHS. I guess we're going to restate the whole motion.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I restate the motion to, I move to vote the implementation or setting up establishment. I move to vote to establish a Magic Club at SMHS.
The motion is to establish, to amend the main motion to vote to replace Mapping Club at Southbridge Middle High School with the Magic Club, to vote to establish a Magic Club at Southbridge Middle High School. Is that correct?
Second.
Mr. Abrahamson seconds the amendment, so we're going to vote here on the amendment first, if there's no further discussion. Okay, vote on the amendment. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes on the amendment?
Thank you. Now we're going to vote the main motion to establish the Magic Club at Southbridge Middle High School. If there's no discussion, may I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes on the main motion?
Thank you. The motion carries. Next, we have Agenda Item 12E. This is a vote to appoint an MASC, Mass Association School Committee delegate and alternate for the joint conference in November 2014. First, I would just say, is there any volunteers? Anybody so inclined to be delegate and alternate? Anybody who is attending the conference that wishes to be delegate or alternate? Show of hands. Anybody?
I'll do it. I'll take
Mrs.
one for the team.
You're going to be the delegate?
Sure, why not?
Mrs. Congdon has volunteered to be delegate. Do we have an alternate? Mrs. Okay, Mrs. Donovan has volunteered to be alternate. So would somebody like to make a motion naming those two people? Mrs. Quinney?
Madam Chair, I ask that unanimous consent that Jill Congdon be named MASC delegate and Kara Donovan alternate for the joint conference, MASC joint conference on November 2014.
Thank you. Is there any objection? Seeing none, then by unanimous consent, Mrs. Congdon has been appointed MASC delegate. Mrs. Donovan has been appointed alternate for the joint conference, November 2014. Thank you. Next, we have Agenda Item 12F, the vote to approve the use of school facilities fee schedule. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Donovan makes the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Congdon. Is there any discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes?
Thank you. Motion carries. Fee schedule has been adopted. And next we come to agenda items 12G, H, and I, which are listed separately but could be combined if so desired. I've been contacted by school committee members regarding the order of the votes and the concern that if one vote didn't carry, how another vote would be impacted. So I would just offer as a possible solution to combine them. That way they live and die together. We can leave them separately. So I would just need a motion to either accept G as is or to combine G and H. So I'm just, is that hand up, Mrs. Quinn?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Madam Chair, I move to combine actions G and H to one vote.
Okay, so Mrs. Quinney is making a motion to vote to combine agenda items 12G and 12H, which is a vote to create an assistant superintendent of teaching and learning position and a vote to eliminate the director of teaching and learning position. Is there a second to Mrs. Quinney's motion to combine?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Abrahamson. Is there any discussion on the motion to combine? Okay, so can I have a roll call vote on the motion to combine the two?
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes.
Thank you. So now we have a combined motion to vote to create an assistant superintendent of teaching and learning position, combined with the vote to eliminate the director of teaching and learning position. Is there any discussion? Ms. Gardner, would you like to talk?
Should we move and second that?
We need a motion? I'm sorry?
So moved.
Thank you. Mrs. Quinney, is there a second on that?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Page. I'm sorry, now discussion. Ms. Gardner, would you like to lead the discussion here?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to say that, first of all, this is a very important position for any district, and it's not about a person, it's about the position. In this position, it gives positional power to the Director of Teaching and Learning, who then would have positional power over all of the directors, not just principals, so that the entire administrative staff at central office would sort of be held to the same standards of teaching and learning as principals and as teachers. So it really does sort of unify what we're trying to do here with achievement. And if I might say, with the next vote, that I think Cheryl Stanton would be an excellent candidate for it. But I do think that last year, another reason that I think this position, without regard to a person, is important is because, as you know, last year, and you know, we hope tragedies never happen, but when Superintendent Nemrikoff became ill, we did not have someone to step into that position, and we had to make, you know, a motion for me to step in as acting. And I just think that having that second person in the district, and again, I go back to the position, regardless of who the person is that it's a very necessary position in current education.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this agenda item? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you. I just wanted to, for the public's sake, know that we did receive job descriptions. And I know that's a fine line of, you know, whether some people claim that we're top-heavy in administration and if we're continuing to create new jobs. I don't think here that I mean, even though it says vote to eliminate and vote to create, it's more of a, I want to say a technical correction to the job of the current or the position of Director of Teaching and Learning. The responsibilities are the same, except that in the absence of a superintendent, they are able to, you know, to be the effective authority and to, like you had mentioned, to oversee the other directors. My question is, would the person in this position be given the ability to be part of the education evaluation for other district administrators, not solely principals?
Yes, they have that power.
Okay. And as far as compensation, just to run it by my fellow committee members, I don't believe there was any change in compensation or pay scale rating or anything like that. It's just a change in title and a confirmation of this Director of Teaching and Learning position is now considered an Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. I just want to make sure that I'm on the right track with that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else? I'm sorry, I just had a brain freeze. Okay, so if there's no further discussion on the motion, then the motion on the floor is to vote to create an assistant superintendent of teaching and learning position and to eliminate the director of teaching and learning position. May I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes.
Thank you, the motion carries. Now would be a vote to appoint Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. The school committee's role here is one of advise and consent. Ms. Gardner, do you have a recommendation for the committee?
I do. I would like to recommend Ms. Cheryl Stanton, our current Director of Teaching and Learning.
Okay, so we need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Abrahamson, which has been seconded by Mrs. Congdon, to appoint Cheryl Stanton, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes.
Congratulations, Ms. Stanton. Thank you. Next, we have unfinished business. This is regarding the Mary Wells Coltrane High School Alumni Association and a change in their intention for a donation that was made last April. I received a letter on September, well, it was sent September 3rd. I received it last week in the central office that the Ms. Helen Santilli and Mr. Richard Genero, representing Mary E. Wells Coltrane High School alumni, had presented a check last April to, not this past April, April 2013, to the school committee with the intention that those funds would be used to purchase pink granite benches to adorn the main entrance of Southbridge Middle High School. For one reason or another, those benches had not yet been purchased, and this committee received word that instead there was a greater need for pavers to complete the outdoor classroom at the back of the school. Therefore, the committee wrote us a letter and would like to change their request to read, the Mary E. Wells Coltrane High School alumni request that the $3,000 donation received on April 9, 2013 for granite benches be used for pavers to complete the outdoor classroom at the new Southbridge Middle High School, and also that a paver or plaque be placed on the site stating gift of Mary E. Wells Coltrane High School alumni. I am not sure that this requires a vote of this committee. We have a policy currently on the books, it's policy KCD, which states that gifts will automatically become the property of the school system, and any gift of cash, whether or not intended by the donor for a specific purpose, will be handled as a separate account and expended at the discretion of the committee as provided by law. I believe with that, we can take the letter that was given and just direct that that happen. So I know that's why it's not on as a vote. It was more for informational purposes. And unless anybody has anything to state or has an objection, I would just like to thank the Mary E. Wells Coltrane Alumni Association again for this donation, and we were going to get right to it and make sure that that work gets completed sooner rather than later, and that the Alumni Association would be properly acknowledged for that. Okay. Thank you. New business. The next regular school committee meeting will be held October 14th, 2014 at 7 p.m. in council chambers. The next item under new business are school committee operating frameworks. I don't know if anybody would like to speak to this item. On the agenda, we had a special school committee meeting on September 10th to discuss our operational frameworks, how we wanted to function as a school committee. If everybody has them in front of them, we could take turns reading them, just like old school. So I'll start. The Southbridge School Committee, the 2014-2015 operational frameworks. For the purpose of enhancing teamwork among members of the school committee and between our school committee and administration, we, the members of the Southbridge School Committee, do hereby publicly commit ourselves collectively and individually to the following operational frameworks. Mrs. Congdon?
The school committee will represent the needs and interests of all the students in our district.
The school committee will establish the vision, create policies, ensure accountability, and set goals for the district.
The school committee will lead by example and work to build trust. We agree to avoid words and actions that create a negative impression of an individual, the school committee, or the district. While we encourage debate and differing points of view, we will speak with care and respect.
The school committee will consider research, best practice, public input, and financial impacts in its decision-making.
The school committee recognizes the superintendent is the chief executive officer responsible for the day-to-day operations of the district and for advising the school committee on items that come before it.
Surprises to the school committee or the superintendent will be the exception, not the rule. We agree to ask the school committee chair to place an item on the agenda instead of bringing it up unexpectedly at a meeting.
This is number 7. The school committee will address issues on the agenda and engage in debate accordingly.
Open communication between district personnel and school committee members is encouraged. However, specific school committee member request of staff will be directed to the superintendent.
Number 9, all communication regarding personnel issues received by the school committee members will be forwarded to the superintendent.
Number 10, school committee members will abide by and follow established chain of command and will encourage others to do the same.
Number 11, when executive sessions are held, school committee members will honor the confidentiality of those discussions.
And the final operational framework is individual school committee members recognize that only the school committee as a whole has authority. When school committee members attend meetings of other committees or boards or act as liaisons of the school committee, they will be speaking as individuals and do not represent the school committee, except when reporting a decision of the majority of the school committee.
Thank you. Are we set with these operational frameworks? Dr. Page.
I just have one suggestion on removing a comma in the second line after "we."
Oh, yes. I see that. Is there any what?
It's a clause.
That's all right. We good with that? Okay. I think we have our operational frameworks. These will be posted on the school committee page of the district website for public review. Thank you. Next, we have the first reading of new policy file EFC Food Services. It's probably the briefest policy we'll ever have. Should we read it? Food services. The Southbridge Public School District Food Service Department operates under the guidance of the National School Lunch Program to ensure that all children in the schools receive proper nourishment. All procedures the district agrees to carry out in order to participate in the National School Lunch, Breakfast, and other food programs will be followed. This policy is intended to replace the free and reduced food services policy of December 2007, as we are now part of the community eligibility provision. That policy was not needed in that capacity. So that's the first reading. And if anybody has any public comment or suggestions, they can forward them to the school committee. Thank you. And now we have member forum. Is there anybody who would like to speak this evening? Mr. Olivo.
I would just like to just take a few minutes and say thank you to all the parents who came out to the open houses. And I had the privilege of volunteering my time and working some of the book fairs and to interface with a lot of the parents that attended the book fair. Thank you for doing so, and thank you for coming out. Again, thank you to the PTA volunteers who put in their work and their time to make this book fair successful. I was asked to provide you with the next PTA meeting, which will be held on Wednesday, October 1st from 6 to 7 at 25 Cole Ave in room 200. That's all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Abrahamson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned before, I attended open houses at 3 of our schools last week. The turnout for all of them was fantastic. The atmosphere and enthusiasm displayed by parents and the children who attended were contrary to the picture that critics of our school system sometimes paint. Also, while performance on the MCAS test should not, must not, and will not be ignored as a measure of progress in student growth, it's only one tool among other observable evidence. Madam Chair, as I walked through the halls of the schools, looking at displays of work done by the students, I saw the results of painstaking work not only by the students, but by their teachers. From the work of the first graders and proceeding through the grades chronologically, there was evidence of students' growth in their writing, in their artwork, in their application of knowledge gained. This only happens with good teaching. And Madam Chair, we have some wonderful teachers in the Southbridge Public Schools. Make no mistake, Southbridge is not one of the easy places for teachers to exercise their craft. And even though we wish our gratitude could be expressed better in financial terms, we know that it takes a special kind of teacher to guide and meet the needs of all of our children. Not everyone can do it. But here in Southbridge, we have many who can and do just that day after day. And I thank them for it. Of course, events like these open houses don't just happen. They're the result of careful planning and hard work. And I want to commend the building principals, Mr. Regan of West Street School, Mr. Latoy of Charlton Street School, Ms. Earls of Southbridge Middle High School, and though I was unable to attend the open house at her school, Ms. Scripsack of Eastford Road School, and each of their respective staffs for a job well done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anything down here? No. I just want to say one thing really quickly. It struck me before when Mr. Boisvert was speaking, and after we were talking a little bit about the MCAS, when we met with the students at Southbridge High School, one of the messages that came through loud and clear is that a lot of times our students don't feel that there is a future waiting out there for them. It's not for a lack necessarily of positive messages, because we know that those students sometimes receive those messages. But I don't know that there's enough of them. I don't know that those messages may be being drowned out by other things as our kids are out in the community at sporting events. I became aware of an incident that happened yesterday on an athletic field where an adult came up to the Southbridge sidelines and made some very nasty, derogatory comments. And I was watching a TV show this weekend. It was on the Oprah Network, and it was Bishop T.J. Jakes, and he was giving a talk about transformation and the power of positive thinking and all of that. And he relayed the story of a female dog that was pregnant and was hit by a car, and her legs were broken, and she had 2 lame legs, and she was still able to give birth, but when those puppies started walking, they started walking dragging the legs behind them, because they figured that was the way they walk. They didn't know how to walk any differently. I think everybody in this, not just the schools, I think everybody in this community needs to model good behavior. When an adult from a different community comes and starts trash talking our students, we need to be able to respond to that. We need to let people know that is not okay. It's not okay. What is the point? And these kids hear these messages, and they repeat them often. I've heard kids say, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm from Southbridge. I'm not going to be a good enough player. I'm from Southbridge. I'm not going to, be successful. I'm from Southbridge. And I think everybody in this community, parents, staff, community members, whether you send your kids to this school district or not, to our school district, at least have a message, at least do no harm. If you can't say something nice, say nothing at all. I learned that in kindergarten. I don't know why that's so hard for adults to get that message. So I just wanted to say that, because we have we have a lot of phenomenal students in this district, and they need to be asked why they're not responding on those MCAS tests, why they're not filling out the open response. It's great that we have instructional people that are looking at the data. That's all very important. Sit down with the kids. It's amazing what they will tell you, and it's amazing the honesty that they'll tell it to you with, and it's amazing the respect they'll show you. So, I don't know, I just felt the need to say that today after I found out what I had heard, and thank you for indulging me and letting me do that. Okay, now we need a vote to go into executive session. We're going to be going, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to first, I know before our last meeting, preschool hadn't started yet, so I wanted to thank the staff at Eastford Road School for a tremendous start to preschool this year. I also wanted to state that, to extend my thanks to everyone in the district. I think it's really easy when the challenges come before us to focus on those challenges, but I think we have to acknowledge the challenges that are before us. I think this MCAS situation is a fantastic example of that, but then acknowledge the problem and then come up with solutions to those problems. So I think oftentimes we just, as a community, focus on the challenge and stop there, but solutions are being put in place and thoughtful people are moving those forward. And also to take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone in the district who I don't think is thanked enough and is painted with a very broad brush. And we do have phenomenal parents, students, teachers, educational assistants, janitors. Everybody is working really hard to make this district better, and I think that we need to acknowledge that and focus on student achievement, and without all of those people in places doing the hard work that is being done, we're never going to get there. So I wanted to say thank you. And I wanted to share a letter quickly that was forwarded on to us. I won't share who sent it, but I think it highlights for the community that kind of the opposite of what Ms. McLaughlin's experience had been regarding that negative experience. This letter was sent on September 18th to the principal of Southbridge Middle High School, and it states, "Good afternoon. I wanted to personally send you a note about our experience visiting your school. I have 2 daughters that run cross-country for Bartlett. My husband and I are lucky enough to have work schedules that allow us to attend every meet. Yesterday, we followed the team to a meet at your school. What an absolute pleasure it was. It was so refreshing to see both the boys and the girls teams, along with coaches, parents, and bystanders rooting everyone on. The crowd went crazy for every child that finished the race. Like every child had come in first, no matter which team they were running for. The crowd was so supportive and showed outstanding sportsmanship. My daughter said that even when she was near the soccer field, people unrelated to the cross-country meet were yelling for her. So often, only bad things are reported and the good never gets mentioned. My husband and I were very impressed with the sincerity and true sportsmanship your teams, coaches, parents, and bystanders showed yesterday. It really made for a great afternoon. Thank you for your time." And she signed her name. So I think that is who Southbridge is, and we need to stand proud, and that's who we are, and represent ourselves in that way and continue to do so. So I'd like to thank everyone that was at that cross-country meet and encourage that behavior to continue and to highlight those positive things that are going on in our community, because there are many and they are not spoken frequently enough. Thank you.
Good way to end it. Thank you, Mrs. Quinney. Now, vote to go into executive session. There are 3 reasons we're going to be going into executive session tonight. First, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for union and non-union personnel or litigation to the extent that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigation position of the governmental body pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Part 3, and the chair so declares. And this would be a discussion of the Southbridge Education Association Unit C contract. Next would be to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Part 6. This would be a lease, a proposed lease with the House of Destiny Ministries doing business as the youth center. And third is to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Part 2, we'll be discussing an educational consultant contract. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion to enter executive
Second.
session. Seconded. Motion made by Mrs. Quinney, seconded by Dr. Page. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes?
Thank you. The school committee will return to open session after executive session. Good evening. Welcome back. We're returning from executive session. It is 10:05 p.m. Please note the presence of all school committee members, the superintendent on the dais. And upon returning to open session, we have a couple of items to take care of. First, we have discussion of the Southbridge Education Association Unit C contract. Mrs. Quinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to give a little history, kind of how the SCA Unit C negotiation went. It was a collaborative experience between the negotiations subcommittee as well as the bargaining unit. And after a lot of work in early August, we came to a tentative agreement. At that time, it was discussed having the SEA Unit C plan to ratify that first day of school, August 27th. The tentative agreement was pending legal review. The bargaining committee, the school committee negotiation subcommittee received that legal review on August 25th with 6 legal issues that needed to be resolved. Prior to our meeting on September 9th, 5 of those 6 issues were resolved as housekeeping and clarification items that the union agreed to concede to change the language within the memorandum of agreement. There was one remaining issue, which was an issue of a probationary period, which had not been discussed during our collective bargaining sessions. So when the school committee went into executive session, they voted to ratify the contract with the provision that a probationary period be attached to that memorandum of agreement. Since that time, and then coming out of executive session, because the tentative agreement had been altered to add that amendment, that is why myself, Mrs. Donovan, and Mr. Olivo voted against the contract. Not that we didn't agree with the memorandum of agreement, however, that provision was not something that we had discussed and agreed to during our, when we had come to the tentative agreement with the SEA Unit C. Subsequent to that, the SEA Unit C conceded to a probationary period, and we have come to an agreement as to what that probationary period would be regarding cause protection. So at this time, the school committee unanimously supports the memorandum as the memorandum of agreement that the SEA Unit C and the school committee had come to during those negotiations, and has also agreed to the probationary cause memorandum of agreement as well. So we unanimously support the agreement itself that we came up with and negotiated, as well as the addendum to that, which is a probationary period MOA. So as it stands, the school committee and the SEA Unit C has a ratified contract, ratified memorandum of agreement that will be written into a contract at this time and will go into effect. My hope is that members of the bargaining unit that were at the table, as well as the president, will be able to come at our next meeting. We can sign that contract that is put together based off the memorandum of agreement, and that we'll be able to talk about what was achieved during those negotiation sessions and how that contract will benefit the school district and especially the students of Southbridge. And that is my report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the House of Destiny Ministries Incorporated, doing business as the Youth Center, a lease agreement. We had discussion in executive session. Anybody have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make
Mr.
a
Lieber?
motion to vote to enter into lease agreement with the House of Destiny Ministries Incorporated, DBA Youth Center, for the period of September 1st, 2014 to June 30th, 2014.
2015, no.
2015.
September, yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry, 2015.
Okay.
Do I
Thank
need
you.
to reread that?
Yeah, just want to restate that? We'll have them restate it, Julianne.
I'd like to make a motion to vote to enter into lease agreement with the House of Destiny Ministries Incorporated, DBA, Youth Center for the period of September 1st, 2014 to June 30th, 2015.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Congdon. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, can I have a roll call, please? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you. I was just going to say that I think it is the feeling of the committee that we would like to thank the House of Destiny in their investment in the kids. I think it was fantastic to listen to how students have been impacted in our community. Thank you for providing them that opportunity, for partnering with the schools in order to help the education of our children moving forward, and thank you for your commitment to this community and seeing it do great things. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Quinney?
Yes.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Yes.
Mrs. Congdon?
Yes.
Mr. Olivo?
Yes.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
All yes?
Thank you. The motion carries. And if nothing else, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Congdon, seconded by Dr. Page. We can adjourn by show of hands. Look at that. It's
All in
unanimous.
favor.
Thank you very much, and have a good evening.